Great. Well, it is 12:30, so let's go ahead and get started anyway, and I'll just mess around with it and see if I can get it going in the
Okay,
background. If not, we are recording this, so I can always post it to Facebook later. So
perfect.
welcome, Sarah, all the
Yes.
way from Egypt, and welcome everyone else to our second Ollie Short of the year. We are going to learn all about Egypt today, and I'll let Sarah go ahead with her presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Stacy, for the opportunity, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm quite excited to be presenting. Is my voice good, or should I talk a bit louder? Perfect. Okay. So I'm not going to take a lot of your time, but I'm very excited about what I'm going to view with you today. So, like Stacy said, I'm Egyptian and I'm currently in Egypt. So what I'm going to do is thank you, Jim. I'm going to take you to a very quick and a concise tour to Egypt in hopes to try to convince you and lure you to visit my country anytime soon. So without further ado, this is my name. My name is Sarah Nazar, and this is my email address. So I'm going to leave the presentation with Stacy and with Thea, and please, anybody feel free to contact me about anything regarding the presentation or about Egypt, or even if you want to chit chat for just send a random message, please feel free to contact me. Okay, so just to start, this is how Egypt looks. This is the Egyptian map. And I know what you're all thinking about. Like, we all know what's happening around the area right now and what's happening in the Middle East and the region. And just to let you rest assured, all the struggle is happening all the way over here. So the rest of, actually all of Egypt is safe. There's only this teeny tiny problem with our neighbors, and it's currently not affecting Egypt any way or in any sorts. So I'm not going to take you through all the cities and governorates in Egypt, but I'm going to try to highlight, in my opinion, the most important places that you should visit and what activities that you can indulge in while you're visiting Egypt. So like, I'm going to start from the north, take you all the way to the south of Egypt. So to start with, we have Alexandria, and this is actually my home city. I come from Alexandria, and in my opinion, it's the greatest city in Egypt, but everybody calls their city the greatest. So what's quite interesting about Alexandria? Well, first of all, it was named after the great Alexander. And as you can see on the top right, where I have my mouse cursor on, this is the new Alexandria Biblioteca. We all know the old one, which was one of the it wasn't one of the seven wonders, but it was one of the biggest libraries ever in the ancient history. And unfortunately, it burned down, but with multiple efforts from the Egyptian government, the UNESCO, and other foreign governments, they were able to rebuild a new library that mimics a bit the old one, and it's also currently one of the largest libraries worldwide, and it's definitely a place worth visiting. It doesn't only have books inside, but it has museums, it has exhibitions, it has a planetarium. It's quite interesting, and it's definitely a place to visit. Under it, we have the citadel. It's called Qaid Citadel. It was built in the Ottoman era in order to serve as a protective fort for Egypt, because basically Alexandria was the first in line for any enemy that's coming from up north or using the Mediterranean. So they definitely needed to protect not only Alexandria, but all of Egypt. So this citadel was built, and actually it was built in the place of the old lighthouse. And this lighthouse was actually one of the ancient seven wonders of the world. And some of the bricks and the stones used were actually gotten from the old lighthouse that was unfortunately destroyed. And lastly, we have one of the most famous museums in Alexandria, which is the Greco-Roman Museum. I mean, I have it covered here with the big Alexandria world, but you can actually see the museum. And one of the actually very interesting things about Alexandria is many people, whenever they say Egypt, the first thing that pops to your mind is pharaohs and pyramids and the Sphinx and everything that goes around tombs and mummies. But Alexandria is a bit more unique because it's more rich with Greco-Roman history and Greco-Roman monuments. And the Greco-Roman Museum is actually in my opinion, one of the best museums that you can visit if you're into Greeks and Romans and Cleopatra and Marcus Antonius and all the love stories that have been happening in this era and Cleopatra. So this is definitely the place for you to visit. And like it's listed here, who can visit Alexandria, anybody who's enthusiastic about history. We also have a couple of pharaonic tombs as well, but not as famous as the Greco-Roman ones we have. Of course, we have amazing beaches. Alexandria is called the pearl of the Mediterranean. So we definitely have good beaches. We have amazing seafood if you like enjoying shrimps and clams and fish. So definitely you have to visit Alexandria. And finally, for anybody who's into culture and heritage, Alexandria was considered the cosmopolitan of Egypt and the Middle East for a very long time in the past. Am I going too fast or this is good? And if anybody has any questions, thank you so much, Jim. You're quite enthusiastic. So the biggest and the most famous place that anybody who comes to Egypt has to visit, which is the capital of Egypt, which is Cairo. I mean, this is all where the magic happens and all the big museums are there. We have two big museums. Actually, we have tons of museums in Cairo, but the two biggest museum is the Grand Egyptian Museum, which is the largest museum for anybody who's into pharaonic history. It has most of the monuments of the pharaohs. They're present there. And honestly, I've been there for like 3 times and I didn't even cover all of the exhibitions in this museum. Cairo has a bit of a different vibe than Alexandria. Like I was saying, Alexandria is more about the Greek Romans. Cairo is different. We have an old Cairo. It's more of the Islamic history. So as we can see where my cursor is at, this is one of the oldest streets in Cairo. It was built as well during the Mamluks era, and it's called Khan el-Khalili. It's quite historical. It's quite vintage. There's lots of old mosques over there, and the streets are actually quite preserved since the time they were built in. Cars are not allowed inside. So basically, if you go walking around, it's like you're walking down memory lane, if I may say. And of course, like you said, it's more about pharaohs and about Islamic Egypt and also Coptic Egypt. So as we can see on the top left, this is one of the most interesting churches in Egypt. It's the Hanging Church because it's actually carved in between two mountains. So it's basically hanging in between, and it's quite safe to visit. So it's not like some sort of an adventure or something. It's actually quite easily accessible and anybody can visit it. Under it is Muhammad Ali's citadel. Again, Egypt, unfortunately, in the past was attacked a lot from externals, so they definitely needed to have lots of forts for protection as well as to serve as a residency for the king or sultan according to the era that it serves in it. So this is actually one of the very interesting places to visit, and it has a mosque associated to it. Again, Cairo is flooded with mosques. We have more than 100,000 mosques in Cairo, whether historical or new mosques. So if anybody's into viewing new religious places and religious areas to pray, so Cairo is definitely the place to go to. And last but not least, of course, the pyramids and the Sphinx. Technically, they're not in Cairo, they're in Giza, but Cairo and Giza, like Cairo is one governorate, Giza is another governorate, but basically it's only 15 minutes or 30 minutes between them. So I just didn't want to divide them into two big cities. So I just included, because the pharaohs, the pyramids and the Sphinx are in Giza. But again, if you book your hotel in Cairo, you can easily visit the pyramids. And I was saying about the museums, of course, I don't know if you've watched, but there was a very huge opening of one of the museums in Egypt, which is the Civilization Museum, where all the mummies that have been discovered in Egypt are displayed there in a very, very well-designed exhibition, and it's definitely a place worth visiting. So if you're into history, if you're into adventures, if you're into shopping, because Cairo is, as much as it has history, it has lots of shopping malls and shopping places to visit, and it's relatively cheap. So if you're into this, then you can definitely, and you have to visit Cairo. Also, it has an amazing nightlife in terms of going out to party or just taking a stroll down the Nile River and just enjoying the view. Basically, Cairo never sleeps. You can go out any time of the day or night and you're gonna find something to do. Well, after this, we go a bit furthest to the south, or Upper Egypt, as we call it here. And this is Luxor, which has 1/3 of the world's monuments. So it's basically like walking into a huge open museum. We can see different temples. It's over there, it's purely pharaohs and purely pharaonic temples. Of course, there's very minute Greek Romans, but they didn't go all the way to the south. So it's predominantly full with pharaonics and hieroglyphics and basically Egyptians as Egyptians. That's why I'm telling you, for those who want to walk like a pharaoh, this is the place to visit. They have a couple of huge temples. So for instance, the one at the bottom, this is Hatshepsut's temple, and Hatshepsut was one of the strongest Egyptian pharaohs and one of the few dominant females that actually took reign over Egypt. And she was very, very successful. Unfortunately, she was taken down by her own brother because he was jealous and he wanted to rule over. And the interesting story about her temple, that, as you can see, it's actually carved inside the mountain around it. So she didn't just transfer the blocks and build it. She actually managed to get the builders to carve it inside. And we were lucky that this temple survived, because unfortunately, when her brother took over, he wanted to erase her from history and he wanted to destroy all the monuments and all the things that she's done. Yes, he did. But this temple actually managed to survive. Above it, we have Karnak Temple, which is also one of the biggest temples in Luxor. And it's quite interesting that they actually have some sort of a show at night. It's called the Light and Sound, where you can actually walk and you have and there's microphones all around the place that recites the history of the temple. So while you're walking, you can actually experience what was happening back at this time. And above, like, this is actually a very interesting tomb or grave, because it belongs to one of the youngest kings or pharaohs that actually managed to rule over Egypt, which is King Tut and Khamun. I'm sure you've all heard about him and his golden mask, and he's one of the few pharaohs that their cemetery was left untouched by robbers, so they managed to retrieve back all the things that were buried with him. And this grave is actually interesting because it's not the only grave in this area, because in Luxor, it's divided by the Nile River to the East Bank and the West Bank. So the West Bank was basically used for burials and for tombs. So basically, there are more than 50 tombs of the pharaohs that you can visit and enjoy, while the East Bank, where you can find the temples, this was for the living. So they had a site for the dead and the site for the living, and both sides are accessible and you can actually enjoy and visit. And the big picture in the back is the hot air balloon trip, which I definitely recommend. If you can wake up early and you don't mind being a bit chilly, then you can definitely take a hot air balloon above Luxor and you can view all the temples and all Luxor from above, and it's quite an exciting experience. And going further than Luxor is its not so close neighbor, but Aswan is also, it's actually the one of the last governorates in Egypt before going into Sudan. And Aswan was, up till very recently, it was called Old Nubia. So the history there is different. The language there, they don't speak Arabic. I mean, they speak Arabic, but they also have their own Nubian language. The culture there is different. The costumes there also is different. But again, Aswan is the place to go if you want to enjoy the Nile River, if you want to enjoy nature, if you just want to chill back while also managing to visit lots of monuments and indulge in the Egyptian history. So as we can see in the middle of the river, this is the Fiala Temple. It was built on an island in the middle of the river. I don't know how they managed to do it, but they did. And actually, this temple almost drowned until the high dam was built, which is also one of the places that you can visit if you ever go to Aswan. It's quite an interesting construction. It's not old. It was built around the 1950s, so it's relatively old, but again, it's one of the interesting places to visit. And down here we can see Abu Simbal's temple, which is again, it was built by King Ramses II, and he built it for himself and his wife. And just before you think that he was quite fond of his wife, so he built a temple for both of them. The side note is he had 24 wives, but apparently this one was his favorite. So yeah, I know it doesn't sound good, but back then it was accepted. And he had more than 100 child and lots of grandchildren. But apparently, I mean, they managed themselves back then. And above here, this is part of the Nubian history. It's called the Nubian village, which is actually a quite nice place to visit, and you can actually stay there. People there are very friendly. They're mostly having some sort of guest houses that people can rent and stay, and you're gonna enjoy the view of the Nile, and you're gonna see lots of migrating birds flying around the Nile. So it's actually a pretty calming experience, if you can ask me. And a quick recommendation and tip, if you don't get seasick, you can actually get a Nile cruise from Luxor to Aswan, and it transfers you from Luxor, and you can visit all the small cities along the Nile River and visit different monuments and the different temples all the way till you visit Aswan, where you spend a couple of days there, and then you can just pop onto a plane and return back to Cairo. But again, this is actually one of the quite interesting experiences that you can have in Egypt. People sometimes just come for 1 week or 5 days just to go on the Nile cruise and visit all these places. Well, enough about the Nile and pharaohs. People who want to go to the beach and want to get suntanned and want to enjoy diving and want to enjoy their lives. So Sharm el-Sheikh and Dahab are actually the place to go to. Sharm el-Sheikh by itself it's in the South Peninsula of Sinai. So I know there's lots of talks about Sinai, but all the hustle that's happening, it's in the north side. So the south is completely safe. Nothing is already there. And it's actually on the Red Sea. So it's definitely one of the most amazing places for diving. And if you can see where I'm pointing here, like on my top right, this is called the Blue Hole, which is on the top 10 places for diving all over the world. So if anybody's into diving, this is definitely the place to go to. Sharm el-Sheikh by itself, it's quite, I'm gonna call it a bit luxurious. It's mainly resorts and fancy hotels. But if you're more into a simple lifestyle and just wanna just relax and get back with nature and just unhinge from everything that's happening, then its neighbor city, which is Dahab, which basically is Arabic for gold, is the place to go to. It's quite a place for chilling. As you can see, it's on the top left. There are no fancy hotels over there, just some camps, and people just go there even with their tents, and they just stay with bonding with the sky and the sea and everything that's happening around. And it's actually also a nice place to visit, but it's not so fancy. So just heads up, you won't have lots of luxury around there. And if you're looking for extreme luxury, then welcome to Hurghada and Gona. These are actually one of the two luxurious cities in Egypt. The one we're seeing where I have my cursor, this is Gona. It's actually a relatively newly built city. It's on the Red Sea, and it's basically a bunch of fancy resorts on the side and lots of sea activities. So if you want to go paragliding, if you want to ride a jet ski, if you just want to go swimming or even enjoy sunbathing, then this is definitely the place to go to. Also, Hurghada, it's on the south of Egypt, not in Sinai Peninsula, but it's the south of Egypt on the Red Sea. Again, amazing beaches, amazing hotels. Not lots of history, but it's quite close to Luxor and Aswan. So if you want to go, book an hotel, stay there, then go visit the pharaohs and the temple, and then return back to luxury, then this is definitely the place to go to. Last but not least, because my presentation said all from pyramids to palms, and I meant palm trees, not palms as palms. So we have Siwa, which is, I'm sure not so many people have heard about it, because this is a small oasis in the middle of the East Desert in Egypt. It's quite a hassle to reach it, but once you go there, you're gonna have your mind blown because yeah, Siwa itself is full of different history. It's full of, like we mentioned, the pharaohs, we mentioned the Greco-Romans, we mentioned the Islamic era, we mentioned the Coptic era. Siwa has a different history. It had different people inhabiting the area over there, still Egyptians, but they have their different culture, their different language, even the food and the costumes they wear, it's totally different. On the top left, we can see this is called Old Siwa. This was the fort that they had, and this was basically all the city until they started extending. And some of these houses are actually still inhabited with people because they mainly divide themselves into tribes, not quite barbarian or not fighting with each other, but because they go all the way back to like to their ancestors, so they each has their own tribe, their own family, their own names, their own houses, and they still preserve their houses. And even the jobs they have, they're mainly working in the desert. They work in harvesting dates from the palms and growing olives and manufacturing olive oil. So this is actually a very good place to visit if you're into, pure simplicity and not like and actually connecting with nature and just disconnecting from all the hassle that's happening around you, whether from your phone, from internet and everything. It still has phone access and everything, but not in all places. And down there, this is actually one of the most famous eco lodges. It doesn't have electricity, it doesn't have network, it doesn't have anything, and it's very quite expensive to go there. And this was actually the honeymoon spot for the current English king and his queen. They spend their honeymoon over there. So, and the room is actually still present. So if you're lucky enough, you can actually stay where the king stayed. So it's actually quite a place to visit, and it's usually used by people who want to lose access and connection to the modern world because, like I said, there's no electricity, there's nothing. Even the furniture inside there, it's all made from wood. There's no steel or iron or anything that relates to the modern life that we all know right now. So if you can leave your phone for a couple of days and you don't mind living with candles, then this is definitely the place to visit. And of course, you should definitely go on a safari in the desert. It's quite interesting. There's actually quite of interesting spots inside the desert that you can visit. Like they have a couple of lakes inside there. So you're basically walking among the sand dunes and the camels and everything. And then bam, there's a lake in the middle of the desert that no one knows how it happened, but it's there. It's quite interesting to visit. And the last photo, they actually have lots of salt lakes. So if you never visited the Dead Sea before, this is actually your chance to float while swimming and not bother about learning how to swim or even have floaters, because no matter how hard you try, you can never sink. And trust me, I tried. Like I tried really hard and I was actually like sitting in the water. So it's quite interesting. Some people say it actually have some healing abilities for some skin diseases and stuff like this, but I wouldn't actually believe them much, but it was fun. So this is basically a very, very quick recap of the most interesting places, in my opinion, to visit in Egypt. And just before leaving you, of course, I'm not gonna forget the food.
Oh,
Yes. Egypt has a very interesting cuisine and it's quite diverse. It ranges, It actually caters all styles and all preferences. So if you're a vegan, a vegetarian, a pescatarian, or a pure carnivore, then you'll definitely find what you want in Egypt. Of course, I'm sure this one is almost famous everywhere, falafel. You know, it was Egyptian for a very long time, but apparently it's making a breakthrough all around the world right now. But it started in Egypt. It's made from fava beans, and it's actually quite a delicacy to enjoy during breakfast. And I've seen the falafel sandwiches prices in the US, so I can tell you with what you pay there, you can actually buy yourself a falafel shop in Egypt with the price of a falafel sandwich in the USA. So it's very cheap where we have it here. And if you're gonna have falafel, then you're definitely gonna have fool, which is the fava beans itself. We make it as a stew and we add different garnishes to it, and you can actually have it your own way. You can add tahini, you can add spices, you can add veggies, you can have it as a sandwich, you can eat it with a fork. I mean, it's quite easy and non-complicated, and you can enjoy it any way you like. And in the middle, this is lots of Egyptian call it the national dish of Egypt, which is koshari. And it's basically a carb bomb because it has rice, it has lentils, it has pasta, it has vermicelli, it has fried onion, and it has tomato sauce, and it has spicy sauce. So yeah, I know it sounds a lot happening in a plate, but once you mix everything together and you have it, it's some sort of a burst of flavors in your mouth, and it's definitely worth a shot. And again, it's actually quite cheap. So Egypt, you can enjoy food while being on budget, and you don't have to worry about overspending. And it's actually all the food is safe to ingest and eat if you get it from the right places. So, and so basically these like the full falafel are basically breakfast food. Koshari, it's more about lunch and dinner because here in Egypt, lunch is the main meal. So it's the equivalent of the American dinner. So we have the biggest meal of the day in the afternoon, not at the evening or night. So you can enjoy this in lunch or dinner. And if you want to go a bit more adventurous, then you can try these for, again, your lunch or dinners. First, on the bottom left, these are stuffed squibs or pigeons. We eat them in Egypt, and it's quite a delicacy and it tastes really good. So we either stuff them with rice and fry them, or we just grill them, and it's quite delicious, quite healthy. Doesn't taste a lot like chicken, but still tastes good. And and also doesn't taste like turkey. It's, I guess, somewhere in between both of these birds, but some people actually are adventurous enough to eat it, and it's quite fun. In the middle, we have molokhia, which is one of the famous Egyptian stews. It's made from, I don't know the name of the plant, but again, we chop it's basically vegetarian. We just chop it and we cook it with some broth, even some vegetable broth. It doesn't have to be animal broth, and we add some garlic to the top of it. And again, you can just consider it some sort of a wild soup if you want, or you can add it to your rice, or you can dip some bread in it and eat it. And on the top right, we have mahshi or stuffed veggies. This is actually a bit close to the Greek dolmas, if you heard about it. So we basically have stuffed vine leaves, we have stuffed zucchinis, we stuff eggplants, we stuff peppers, and we can stuff it with rice and veggies, or with the minced meat, or with rice and meat. So Egyptians are quite versatile and they like experimenting with food. And again, these are basically couple of the famous plates in Egypt. And if you're not so adventurous when it comes to food, we still have lots of international brands. So you're gonna find McDonald's, you're gonna find Pizza Hut, you're gonna find KFC. So nobody starves in Egypt, and everybody finds something to eat eventually. And again, the budget can vary. Like $1 can get you a feast, and you can actually have another feast with 10 US dollars. So you don't have to worry about how expensive the food is, and depends how luxurious you want to go. And even still, like if you pay 50 US dollars in a restaurant, you're gonna get yourself full. Actually, you can feed a family of 5 or 6 with 50 US dollars in Egypt. So you don't have to worry much about food. And for desserts, we have we have basbousa, which is baked semolina flour, and we usually garnish it with almonds or hazelnuts or basically any type of nuts, and we add lots of sugary syrup to it, so it's quite sweet but still quite delicious. And we have lots of Egyptian places that serve it. Even you don't have to buy the whole tray; they sell it per piece. And the one in the middle, I would say this is the Egyptian version of bread pudding. It's called Ali or Ali's mother, if you're looking for the literal translation, because it actually goes all the way back to the Ottoman era. It was distributed during celebrations, and it's quite a festivity dessert, if I may say, and it's quite delicious and hearty. We basically use any it was originally made with bread soaked in milk and sugar and cream, and then it's stuffed in the oven, and when it comes out you just add any types of nuts you want to it, and you can enjoy it hot or cold, preferably hot of course, but again, you can enjoy it any way you like. And last but not least, rice pudding. I know this is not quite Egyptian, but we actually invest a lot in it. And right now we have like the traditional rice pudding, and we just sometimes we garnish it with some cinnamon or nuts. And right now with the millennials and their ideas, we have it with Nutella and lotus and pistachio sauce on it. So yeah, you can either stick to the traditional way or can experiment with all the other flavors, and it's all good. But all of these, it's too much calories. So if you're gonna come to Egypt, just make sure you have a couple of pans that bit 1 or 2 sizes bigger, because you're gonna eat a lot. So lastly, just for the tips and tricks on how to survive in Egypt. So we usually tip people who serve. It doesn't have to be a lot, because like I was telling Stacy, right now with the devaluation of the Egyptian pound against the US dollar, so basically $1 is around 30 Egyptian pounds, and 30 Egyptian pounds here can get you 3 falafel sandwiches. So yeah, it's relatively quite cheap right now, but again, you can tip, and the tip depends on how generous you are and the service that's being provided. Because if you come out of the airport, you're gonna see people, gathering around you, trying to help you and everything. Just make sure to have your stuff close to you, because some of these people are not in it to help, but again, the majority are actually trying to help you. So just giving 10 Egyptian pounds or 20 Egyptian pounds is more than enough, and it's more than great. I know in US dollars this is less than $1, but in Egypt it's quite good, and it's actually the norm. So you don't have to indulge a lot on tips and the small bills. But again, just the 10 or 20 bills here or there, it's people are actually quite grateful, and they're gonna be extremely happy about it. It's always advisable to know a couple of Arabic words. Again, we have 100 million people in Egypt, and unfortunately, not all the 100 million can speak in English. Some of them know the basics, but again, if you know a couple of phrases like hello and thank you and welcome and words like this, that makes you look cool, first of all, and it decreases the chances of you being hustled in one of the local shops. And yeah, dressing modestly, and by modest, I mean you don't have to wear a headscarf, and you don't have to cover all over, because Egypt is quite liberal compared to other countries, if you're thinking of any other countries. So but like in some areas, like in very crowded streets or in the downtown of Cairo or Alexandria, it's always advisable just to, I'm not gonna say dress modestly, but it's usually to dress accordingly, because it doesn't have any beaches, it doesn't have anything, it's just a street with lots of shops and cars. So just maybe just popping into a jeans and a sweatshirt, or even shorts or dresses, they're actually still quite accepted. And bikinis and hot shorts and and stuff like this. You can wear them in resorts and in around on areas around the beach. Quite accepted. People don't mind. We don't have no nude beaches around here, but bikinis and all types of swimwear are quite accepted. And again, like I said, you don't have to cover your head or wear long clothes and stuff. Maybe only if you're visiting inside of a mosque and they provide it to you when you're going inside. But this is not the norm in Egypt. You can wear whatever you want whenever you want. Well, definitely stay hydrated because Egypt is quite hot, even if I say it's cold right now, but for South Dakota and for the US, it's still quite hot. So please make sure to stay hydrated and make sure to drink water. And please don't drink water from the tap. You always drink bottled water. And again, for the food, just I know there will be lots of food kiosks and places around, and apparently from most of the my friends that I had from abroad, apparently, foreigners do not go well with the food sold in kiosk, even if it's quite safe. But I guess it has to do with how your microbes in the GIT works and stuff like this. So unless you don't want to waste a day stuck in a bathroom, so just be a bit careful what you eat and where you eat it, and always have some antimicrobial drugs with you because 90% of the people actually get a bit some sort of a stomach bug when they visit. And I guess it's more about like the traveling and the change of weather and everything, but better safe than sorry. And of course, it's preferable to use a registered tour operator in order to organize your tour. Yes, it's going to be a bit expensive, but again, in Egypt, it's quite a good investment to pay somebody to just organize everything and just for you not to have to worry about all the minute details and about people who are again trying to rip you off and stuff like this. So it's good to have to pay for someone instead of actually losing this money on not so successful endeavors. Again, be cautious with waters and drinks and food. About the security checks and the military presence, we don't have tanks walking around and we don't have militias and we don't have people walking around with guns. But again, you can go through security checks, especially in touristic areas. And believe me, these people are there to protect you, not the opposite. And the worst that you can do is you're gonna put your bag through the scanner, then take it, and then you go. This is the worst that can happen. And again, according to the currency, we do not deal with the US dollars, so it's preferable, of course, to have Egyptian money with you. In Egypt, we deal with the Egyptian pound, so it's usually good. Of course, there's lots of transfer offices, and you can do it at the bank and in different places. So even if you have US dollars with you, but I mean, you cannot go into a shop and give him US dollars. I mean, the guy's gonna be happy because it's a fortune for him, but it's not going to get you anywhere. So it's always preferable to have the Egyptian currency with you. Also, not all places work with the MasterCards and debit cards. So again, I mean, the majority right now has Visa machines and you can actually pay with your Visa or your debit card, but it's always preferable to carry on some cash with you. Not a lot of cash, but still having some cash when you're going around, it's good. Even for the worst case scenario, if you're going to tip somebody or just buy a bottle of water, it's always good to have some cash with you. Well, thank you or shukran in Arabic. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer it.
We do have a
Sarah,
few questions in the chat too.
Oh,
and
really?
Stacy, I have a question too.
Yep, go ahead.
I tuned in later, so I don't know if you covered it or not, but could you talk about the City of the Dead in Cairo?
The City of the Dead in Cairo. That's an interesting one. Actually,
I think it's the cemetery that people live in.
Yes, it is. And right now, the government is trying to not to transfer these people into more proper places because, like you said, people are actually living not with the dead,
Right.
but you can see a cemetery next to it, a house, and it's considered more a not so safe place for people to live in. So the government's actually trying to replace them with new houses and reconsider even the position of the cemetery because it's in the middle of the city and it's occupying a very big place. So yeah.
Oh.
And Some people say that there's very interesting tombs to visit over there, but I actually wouldn't put it on the list of places to visit because it's relatively in a bit of a shady neighborhood. So, yeah,
How about I also heard talk about the garbage city?
this also got removed.
And is that, can you get anywhere close to it or just see it or?
Well, it's actually it was just one of the neighborhoods in Egypt. It's quite near Old Cairo, I guess, or near the pyramids. And people there were making their living from picking
Mhm.
the garbage and whatever they can sell, they sold it. But again, it was extremely unhygienic. Even the houses they built for themselves, they were like, one of the small houses with no roofs and no doors. So this, I know actually this one got totally removed. The Dead City is still around. The main bulk is still there, and the cemetery is definitely still there, but the garbage one is got removed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I where's the chat? I wanna see.
Rick just asked, when did the library burn down? I think that was right at the beginning when you started talking.
Yes, the library got burned down. I'm gonna say it was around the war between Egypt and the Roman Empire when Caesar was fighting with Marcus Antonio, and I guess actually it wasn't burned down on one occasion. It kept burning, like small pieces of it burning and then turning it and then like getting the fire off. But the biggest fire was when I guess, I'm not so sure, I'm not a historian, but I'm gonna go back into my memory and I'm gonna say yes, it was during the fight between the Roman Empire and Cleopatra and Antonio. I guess the Roman troops accidentally hit it with, they had the archers with the fire and everything, and it just burned. And back then there was no electricity, and all the library was actually lit by candles, and it had lots of scrolls and lots of papers, so it was very easy to catch on fire, and it was very easy to burn down. And like they call it as what was one of the biggest loss in history, because interestingly, what happened in this library and how it was built and all the scrolls they had, Alexandria was the main port for Egypt. So whenever any ship passed through and they stayed, the troops from Alexandria, they used to go on the ship and they see if they had any scrolls or anything, and they took the scrolls, they write it down, and they kept it in the library, and then they give it back to whoever was on the ship. And they kept doing this with every ship that passed around from all over the world. So this is why they had a huge diversity of books and scrolls from all over the world in different languages and different areas of education and chemistry and mathematics. So it was indeed the greatest library of its time.
Wow.
Uh,
Got another question from Kathy. She's just wondering, what's the best months to visit Egypt?
what's the best month to visit Egypt? Well, I'm gonna say it depends on the place you want to go to. So, for instance, if you're speaking about Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada, these are preferably to be visited in winter because they're extremely hot in summertime. Alexandria and Cairo, they're a bit chilly in winter, and the weather is more reasonable during summertime. So if you want to go into summer, so I definitely recommend something more near the north. Again, the south of Egypt, such as Luxor and Aswan, they get quite extremely hot during the summertime. So I would definitely recommend visiting during winter. So anywhere from September till February or March, you can visit more to the south. After this, you can head more to the north where the beaches are, the Mediterranean beaches and the Cairo and places like this. But basically, you can visit Egypt anytime around the year. And even the places where it's extremely hot, if you don't mind extreme weathers, they can still enjoy it.
Great. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone else here does too. If
Thank you.
anyone has any questions, just feel free to unmute. There's only a few of us here, but I'm gonna send this to my daughter. She's gonna be amazed by this.
It's my pleasure. And thank you so much for listening and for the opportunity. I hope I helped a bit and I wasn't boring and you actually enjoyed it. So I enjoyed my time. So I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yes. And
Sarah?
Sarah did.
Sarah, I have a question. Do you live in Cairo?
Currently, I'm in Cairo, but I'm originally from Alexandria.
And if anybody is interested in visiting, like Stacy's daughter, maybe, do you recommend, or would you recommend tour companies, or
Definitely. I was
If
going to
we-
say this.
if we go
yes.
through Thea or something and get your email, we could communicate with you and you could help us with planning a trip or something like that?
Yes, please. I actually have my contacts in the start. I'm gonna get you as well my phone number and my WhatsApp number, and please feel free to contact me anytime regarding any questions. If you need help with visiting, if you're in Egypt or you want to go out for a cup of coffee or visit anywhere in Egypt, I'm always there. I would be more than happy to meet any of you.
Stacy, maybe Ollie should do the trip there.
I'll let you plan that, Mildred. Yes, if anyone wants Sarah's information, just reach out to me and I will be happy to get that to you. All right, you guys have a great rest of your afternoon, and it's probably about bedtime where you live.
It is. It's 9 p.m.
9 p.m. on a Friday. That's crazy. Thank you so much. I appreciate you
You're
all and have
welcome.
a great day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you
Stacey.
so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Sarah.
Bye.
Thank you. Enjoy your time. Goodbye.
You too.